In 1967, the most famous athlete on the planet stood in a government office and refused to take one small step forward. That single moment cost him everything: his title, his license, his income, and nearly his freedom. He was 25 years old. He was undefeated. He was untouchable inside a boxing ring. And he chose to walk away from all of it. Not because he was scared, because he wasn't. The question nobody fully answers is this: who was Muhammad Ali before the world decided who he was? His name wasn't always Muhammad Ali. He was born Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. in Louisville, Kentucky in 1942. Louisville was a city with invisible walls. There were places a black boy could go and places he simply could not. Cassius grew up knowing those walls. He didn't accept them, but he knew they were there, pressing in from every direction. When he was 12 years old, someone stole his bicycle, a red Schwinn. He was furious and went looking for a police officer. That police officer was Joe Martin, who also ran a boxing gym in the basement of the Columbia Auditorium. Cassius told Martin he wanted to fight whoever stole his bike. Martin looked at this skinny, angry kid and said he should learn to fight first. That was the beginning, not a grand moment, just a stolen bicycle and a kid who couldn't let things go. Within weeks, Cassius was in that gym every single day. He was not naturally the biggest or the strongest boy there, but he was the most obsessive. He would run before school, train after school, and lie in bed at night thinking about footwork. His trainer noticed something strange. Cassius pulled his head back instead of slipping punches properly. Every coach called it wrong, but his hands were so fast and his feet moved so quickly that punches couldn't find him anyway. He turned the wrong technique into a weapon. By 18, he had won 100 amateur fights and lost only 5. He won the Golden Gloves. Then he won the national championship. Then he went to the 1960 Rome Olympics as a teenager and won the gold medal. America celebrated him. Briefly. Here is something most people don't know. When Cassius came home from Rome with that gold medal around his neck, he was still refused service. He walked into a restaurant in Louisville, still wearing his medal, and was told to leave. Some accounts say he threw the medal into the Ohio River that day. He later confirmed the medal was lost, though the exact story has some dispute. What isn't disputed is what he felt. The medal meant nothing to a country that still wouldn't serve him lunch. That experience did something to him. It planted a question that would grow louder every year. What exactly am I fighting for? He turned professional and began destroying opponents with a style nobody had ever seen before. He was 6'3", and moved like a middleweight. He talked. Constantly. He wrote poems predicting which round he'd win. He called himself the greatest before anyone agreed. Sports writers hated it. They called him a loudmouth. They called him arrogant. They wanted him quiet and grateful. He was neither, and that was deliberate. He understood something about attention that most athletes never figure out. If they're talking about you, even to criticize you, they're watching you. He made himself impossible to ignore. His fights in the early 60s were almost unfair to watch. He beat opponent after opponent while barely getting touched. Then came Sonny Liston, and everything got serious very fast. Liston was the heavyweight champion of the world in 1964, and he was terrifying. He had knocked out Floyd Patterson twice in the first round. The FBI had a file on him. He had ties to organized crime. He stared at opponents before fights, and some of them looked away first. Cassius Clay was 22 years old and was given a 7-to-1 chance of losing. Some people thought he might get seriously hurt. The night of the fight, Cassius arrived at the arena so loud and so electric that the crowd didn't know what to do with him. Then the bell rang, and the impossible started happening. Cassius moved so fast Liston couldn't solve him. He hit and disappeared. By round 6, Liston's eye was swollen. His shoulder was injured. When the bell rang for round 7, Liston did not stand up. The new heavyweight champion of the world was 22 years old. The arena went into chaos. And then the very next morning he said something that changed everything. He announced he had joined the Nation of Islam. The reaction was immediate and savage. Sponsors backed away. Newspapers called it a scandal. Former supporters went silent overnight. He didn't explain himself. He didn't apologize. He said, "I don't have to be what you want me to be." Soon after, he changed his name. Cassius Clay was gone. Muhammad Ali was the name he chose, and he intended to keep it. Many reporters refused to use it for years. They kept calling him Clay, which he said felt like a slave name being thrown back at him. The more they pushed, the more he pushed back. He was not performing defiance. He genuinely believed in what he was doing. He also genuinely believed in his faith. The Nation of Islam, and later Sunni Islam, gave him a framework for understanding the world he lived in. Around him, the civil rights movement was in full force. Cities were burning. Leaders were being killed. The country was splitting open. Ali was watching all of it and was no longer willing to simply be a boxer in a suit who smiled for photographs. He defended his title 9 times between 1965 and 1967. 9 fights. He won them all. Some were dominant. Some were dangerous. The rematch with Liston in 1965 ended controversially in the first round with a punch many viewers said they couldn't even see land. Conspiracy theories flew. The boxing world shook. Ali just moved on to the next fight. He always moved on. But the real fight was coming. And it wasn't inside a ring. In 1966, Ali received a letter from the United States military. He had been reclassified as eligible for the draft. The Vietnam War needed men. He had actually been tested 2 years earlier and had not qualified. When they reclassified him, his response was immediate and public. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." That one sentence traveled around the world before the day was over. Veterans groups were furious. Politicians called him a coward and a traitor. His phone rang constantly. The threats were real. But here was the part that mattered. He wasn't just saying words. He actually believed it. This was not a publicity strategy. He applied for conscientious objector status on religious grounds. He said his faith did not allow him to participate in a war he considered unjust. The government denied the application. On April 28, 1967, he went to the Houston Induction Center with the cameras waiting outside. They called his name, Cassius Clay, 3 times. He did not step forward. 3 times. He stood completely still. He was arrested. Within hours, the New York State Athletic Commission stripped him of his boxing license. The WBA took his title. He was 25 years old, undefeated, at the very peak of his physical life as a fighter. And it was all gone in one afternoon. A federal court convicted him of draft evasion. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. He remained free while the appeal moved through courts, but he could not work as a boxer, not in America. Not anywhere that mattered. For 3.5 years, Muhammad Ali did not fight. He gave speeches on college campuses. He debated. He sat with the consequences of his choice. Most people assumed he was finished, that when boxing came back, if it came back, he'd be too old and too slow. Some of those people were right about the physical part, but they underestimated something else entirely. In 1971, the Supreme Court overturned his conviction unanimously, 8-0. They ruled the government had never properly explained why his application was denied. He had won, but 3.5 years were gone. Those are years a fighter never gets back. The body changes in ways training cannot reverse. He returned to boxing, and the first thing he discovered was that the layoff had taken something real. He couldn't move the same way. The dancer was still there, but the legs weren't always cooperating. He started taking punches he would have avoided years earlier. His first big fight back was against Joe Frazier in March 1971, the fight of the century. Madison Square Garden was electric. Both men were undefeated. Both claimed to be champion. The world genuinely did not know who would win. Neither did they. Frazier knocked him down in the 15th round. Ali got up, but Frazier won by decision. The first loss of Ali's professional career. He sat in the dressing room afterward with a jaw so swollen it had to be checked for fractures. He was quiet. People who knew him said they had never seen him like that. He didn't disappear. He kept fighting. He won fights, lost one to Ken Norton in 1973. Norton broke his jaw, then won the rematch. He was moving toward something. A rematch with Frazier. And beyond that, something that seemed completely impossible. George Foreman had destroyed Frazier. 2 knockdowns in the first round, 2 more in the second. The fight was stopped in 2 rounds. Foreman was 25 years old, 6'4", and hit people so hard that experienced fighters talked about his punches the way people talk about car crashes. Ali was 32. He had already lost a decision and had his jaw broken, and he signed to fight Foreman in Zaire in October 1974. The world thought it was over for him. Serious boxing people genuinely feared for his safety. This was not a story where everyone believed in him. He went to Kinshasa, Zaire, weeks early. He ran in the streets at 5 in the morning. Local people ran with him. He spoke to them. They loved him. The fight was called the Rumble in the Jungle. And Ali had a plan that almost nobody knew about in advance. He called it rope-a-dope. He went to the ropes early and covered up, letting Foreman throw massive punches into his arms and body. It looked like a disaster. Commentators thought he was being beaten. His own corner was confused and afraid. But Ali was calculating. He was watching Foreman get tired. Each round, those enormous punches came slightly slower, slightly less sharp. Foreman threw an enormous number of punches in those early rounds, more than any fighter should in that heat and humidity. Then in the 8th round, Ali came off the ropes. He threw a combination. Foreman stumbled. Ali hit him again, and Foreman went down. He did not get up before the count. The man who everyone said could not be beaten was on the canvas in Zaire. The crowd noise at that moment, even in old recordings, sounds like something breaking open. Muhammad Ali was heavyweight champion of the world again. At 32, after everything, he was champion again. There was a 3rd fight with Frazier in 1975 called the Thrilla in Manila. Many people who watched it consider it among the most brutal athletic contests ever held. Both men were nearly finished by round 14. Frazier's trainer stopped the fight before the 15th round started. Frazier never truly forgave that decision. Ali said afterward, in a rare quiet moment, that it was the closest thing to dying he had ever felt. He meant it. He kept fighting too long. Most champions do. The human body has limits that confidence and will cannot permanently override. By the late 1970s, the signs were there. His speech was changing. His movements were slowing. The punches he had taken over 20 years were leaving a permanent mark. He lost to Leon Spinks in 1978, won the rematch to become champion a 3rd time, then finally lost to Larry Holmes in 1980 in a fight that should never have happened. Holmes was his friend. Holmes held back. Holmes cried in his dressing room afterward. The fight was stopped in the 11th round. In 1984, Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's syndrome. His doctors connected it to the repeated head trauma from decades of professional boxing. The man who had once moved and talked faster than anyone had trouble controlling his hands and his voice. The contrast was hard to watch. But here is what happened that nobody expected. He became more beloved in his silence than he had ever been in his noise. At the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, he walked out to light the Olympic flame. His hands were shaking visibly as he held the torch. 90,000 people in that stadium went completely silent for a moment. Then the sound came. A wave of something between cheering and emotion that people who were there still talk about. He stood there, torch burning, and did not look away. Whatever you thought about his fights, whatever you thought about his politics, in that moment, he was just a man standing in the fire he had always walked toward. Muhammad Ali died on June 3, 2016. He was 74 years old. Presidents spoke, champions cried. People in countries he had never visited held photographs of him in the streets. Here is the thing about Ali that takes time to understand. His greatest fight was never against Liston or Frazier or Foreman. His greatest fight was against the idea that an athlete should stay quiet and be grateful, that you could be great inside the lines and invisible outside them. He refused that, at great personal cost, at the peak of his power. When it would have been so much easier to simply step forward, he lost 3.5 years. He lost those years permanently. And when history finally looked back, it agreed with him on almost everything. What he did in that Houston Induction Center in 1967 was not a performance. It was a man deciding who he was going to be when it was expensive to be that person. And the world spent the next 50 years slowly catching up to the answer he gave in that quiet moment. The greatest athletes show you what a human body can do. Ali showed you what a human will can choose. That's the difference. And it is not a small one. He gave up the prime years of his career for a belief. Was he right to do it? Or did the cost outweigh the cause?